The first question I want to ask you: politics,
Fashion.
Sexuality.
religion, films,
Nigeria.
sports, music. Because of my career. Just ask. Hi, it's another week and it's time to ask Fumi. So, what are we going to talk about this week? What did you ask me? I actually remember this question because when I got it, I thought. Anyway, the question is this, and it's from Adora. It says, "How should mothers raise better sons slash men?" And my immediate reaction is, why are we talking to mothers? Did you see me blink? Why are we talking to mothers alone? Because parenting, usually two people make a person, a man and a woman, father and mother. And so whoever the person turns out to be, whether it's a man or a woman, whether it's a boy or girl, is really as a result of the parenting or lack of parenting he or she gets from the mother and the father. Of course, there are other factors that also contribute, but basically, it's both man and woman, mother and father, that raises the child. And I know that there's a lot of pressure on women. It's always said that, women should raise their, certainly in Nigeria, that women tend to mollycoddle. They tend to prefer their sons. And there are reasons for this, because if you have a society that is so patriarchal, having a son is of high value, because many times women lose their marriages because maybe the husband might say she didn't have a son, although that doesn't make sense because both man and woman make son and daughter, and particularly the man makes son. So anyway, I'm not going to go into a biology lesson, but the fact of the matter is it should be both parents. But the emphasis usually, at least in our culture, on women is because they get more pressure. However, how do we raise better men generally, whether men or whether fathers or mothers? And I'm concerned that we're asking about raising better men. Also, I understand why we're asking that question. So I'm not going to try and say, oh, we should just raise better women and men. I think generally we should raise better people, men and women. But I understand the question about men in particular, because men do need to do better. I think that that's universal. And this is not an attack on men. I hope it's understood that it's not an attack on men. But generally, the world we've built now doesn't serve, I don't think it serves men well, and certainly doesn't serve a lot of women as well as it can. However, how do you raise men better? How do you raise better men? I think it's to raise men to not be men, but to be human, to be people, to raise children, men, male and female children, to be driven by the content of their minds, their ideas, who they are. Because your sexuality is not the same thing as your gender. I think we've covered this topic so many times. I'm becoming a bit tired of it, that what we consider masculine or feminine is a social construct. So we can wake up today and say, oh, green is the color of masculinity. We can say, oh, tomorrow we prefer men to wear makeup. Oh, tomorrow we can say we prefer men to whatever. But this idea right now of the world we live in, where to be masculine is to be you holding your emotion, you're strong, you protect your woman, you like certain things, you are hard, it doesn't really serve anybody. So really, what to do is to raise children to consider themselves as human first. And I think that children come like that until we start messing with them. They come like that without an awareness of themselves as a gender. Of course, they come with biological, I'm not even talking sexuality, there are girls and there are boys. Even that, there's a lot of conversation around there to determine, aside from your genitalia, what your hormones are, how they are structured, all of that. But that's not the conversation for today. The conversation for today is that to raise better men, you need to raise better humans. You need to raise men to see themselves, not first and foremost as a man, but as a woman. This concerned me because I remember a few years ago, these little children were over at mine to play, and the little boys were already saying to the girls, and the girls were already also expectant and saying to the boys that you should be the one cooking, you should be the one doing this, you should be the... I was surprised because these were children who were like 5, and already they had been conditioned to think that certain roles were for boys and certain roles were for girls. They were also conditioned that certain behavior was... So if the boy was crying, they would say, "Is a weak boy, is a sissy boy," that sort of thing. And that doesn't help anybody. And so how do you do that practically, really? Because there's a lot of arguments. Some people say you should not assign a gender to your child at birth. Some people say don't give them certain kind of toys, give them another kind of toys. So you see people who give their girl children only so-called masculine toys. So they give them like toy soldiers, they give them, trains, and they give them all that. People are also giving boys like dolls and all of that. So I think that generally you should follow your child. Most children come, with their own interests. You should just be curious, as to what your child is interested in. So make a lot of things available. Toys, toy soldiers, Barbie dolls, whatever it is, put them all there. Let the child go in the direction of what they want. Give them the choice to be what they want. And there are people that I've seen, for example, who are interested in... for example, when I was growing up until now, actually, I have interest in so-called masculine things. And because my mind doesn't see them as masculine, it sees them as processes and things. I want to understand how it works. And that is not a gender thing. That's not a gendered thing. That's not masculine or feminine. That's just a person thing. And I've seen also men who are interested in so-called feminine things. And they will say to you, this is why I'm interested in it. So it's one of those topics where I think we should already know. We shouldn't be having a conversation about it. We should just know by now that but I'm also conscious that maybe I'm talking to a class of people, and in certain parts of the world, certainly in many parts of Nigeria, it's not even an issue. Girls are raised this way and boys are raised this way, and that is that. Nobody is discussing it. I'm hoping that more and more this will change. Why is it important that it should change? It's important that it should change because nobody should be repressed. Nobody should be made to live less than they are capable of. And men not being raised to be emotional, to be engaged with all sorts of creative activities that they might ordinarily have interest in, is restrictive of them. Raising boys not to play with girls as friends, once they get to a certain age, they shouldn't be playing together. It's restrictive. They should be able to engage with one another in that way. What else do they do with boys? It's just restrictive. Just as it is restrictive of girls to say you can't do this, it is restrictive of boys to say you can't do this. A child should be allowed to be who they naturally want to be, what they're interested in. You should let them go in the direction of their interest. I know that sometimes I'm talking to people, just look at me and they roll their eyes that that's how that one will not end up as gay. Nobody ends up as gay. That's the one that makes it. Nobody ends up as gay. I don't know how hard it is to explain that. Nobody ends up as anything. They either are or they are not. So it's not the toys you gave to them that made them end up that way. It's not the opportunities you expose them to that made them. It's not the TV show that you allowed them watch, or the music you allowed them listen to that made them a certain way. All of these things come together to condition us socially. But when it comes to our biological preferences, that's a different conversation whatsoever. So I think that we should raise people to be human so that people can be more creative and expansive. The more people are creative and expansive and gifted and just able to do really special things, the better it is for us as human beings. The way it is now, and it's not just raising men to be a certain type of masculine only, it's also the idea of energies. So not valuing the feminine energy, the feminine ideas, which both men and women have, is restrictive in terms of the things that we can come up with, the solutions we can come up with, the systems that we come up with, and how beneficial they are to us. The balance of the feminine and the masculine energy in each person and in each process and in each institution is what will help us to live better as human beings. See, I said not just in persons, but also in institutions and in systems. So even when you are solving a problem, You look at the problem. How do you look at it? Do you look at it only in one way, or do you look at it from different sides? A so-called masculine way and a so-called feminine way. It's like warfare, for example. Oftentimes people say there would not have been a war if people chose softer power. There's what they call hard power and soft power. So these things they're not so complex, but they traverse all parts of life. And I think that the more aware we are of it, the better. So because our children, both male and female, will end up in leadership positions, they will end up leading nations, leading organizations, leading families, both male and females. It's important that from childhood they are raised to be first and foremost fully functional human beings, both their female side and their male side, so that they take decisions that are healthier for all of us on the long run. I think that's why it's important. And it is not a woman's job. It is a job of both father and mother. It's a community work job. So it's actually not just the parents. It's also the schools. It's also the churches, mosques, synagogues, all the other factors that affect how people are formed. I think that we should start to raise humans, not to raise men and women. That's all I have to say about that. I hope it made sense. I think the second question I have today is one of those questions. I swore that I was not going to talk about marriages anymore because I'm sick and tired of talking about marriage. I'm just sick and tired. And the other thing is, why are you always sending me questions about marriage? Javier, I'm consciously unmarried, so you are asking the wrong person. However, since I've been asked this question, and because there's another part of it that I thought is interesting, the question is, when is the best age to get married? When is the best time to get married? Because my biological clock is ticking away. It's interesting that it's usually women who are asking that question. I don't think, I've asked around a little, men certainly don't have the same pressure to get married as women do. And it's different from cultures to culture. Certainly in Nigeria, it is a huge, humongous pressure on women to get married. And I don't know what to say to anybody that I haven't said before. What I'm going to say in a nutshell, particularly the second part of which is what matters, because she said, I want to have children, and I'm afraid my biological clock is ticking away. And that's true, because the older you get, the harder it is to have children. But the fact of the matter about children is, we take for granted this idea of, I want to have children. I haven't heard people say, do I want to have children? Do I deserve to have children? I don't think everybody should have children. I think that some people just don't deserve to have children. And what I mean by that is that they're not ready to have children. They're not ready emotionally. They're not ready in many other places to actually raise other human beings. So the question should not be, I want to get married to have children. It should be, am I ready? Am I prepared to have children? And to have children, ideally in the world we live in today, it's good to have children where it's both parents who are parenting, because it's hard to raise children on your own. So it's good to have somebody who is a companion with you raising children. I don't think that you need marriage to have children. I think that marriage at the end of the day is a commitment between two people. So the legalizing of that is different from culture to culture. I think it's good when you introduce whoever you are with to your family. That is marriage. To take the further step of getting a certificate, that is just that should be a practical, mostly economic decision. Because it will be an unpractical or impractical economic decision if it all goes awry, depending on the culture you are, because divorce is very expensive financially and it's expensive emotionally and all of that. But the emotional part, that will happen anyway, even if you didn't sign a paper. So that's just life. But the other bit where you are now going to be tying your resources together, then you have to actually consider it the way you would consider a business. If you're going to go into partnership with a person, you have to think, did we agree on how we want to conduct this relationship? Will this person respect this agreement that we have conducted? Who is going to be the arbitrator between us if things don't go right? And between the two of us, what skills does this person have to negotiate difficult times? Because there will be negotiations. That's what you do when you go into a partnership. Why would you not think that way if you're going to marry? Because remember, once again, marriage is really an economic arrangement. Love is different from marriage. Fortunately, hopefully you can marry love and marriage, but just that arrangement of signing papers It's really a technical, legal, economic thing sometimes, hopefully. But the bit about just being together, being in love, raising a child together, that's a personal thing between two people. And as to ticking time, I think that women should not worry so much. I think they should have it at the back of their mind if they want to have children, because it does matter. But I don't think that we should worry so much. I have seen people in their 50s having children. I mean, these days there's so many options for women. There are people who freeze their eggs, and when it's time, when they find the person they want to have children with, they go ahead and do what they need to do. But the pressure of just, I want to marry just to have children, is also a big problem, because children is not enough reason to marry. Yes, I said it, children, what the desire to have children is not enough reason to get married. I think that particularly for a place like Nigeria, where the population explosion is before us, we should become more conscious about the decision to become parents and how many children we want to have and whom we're going to have these children with. I hope I've made sense. I hope so. Anyway, that's the end of today's. What is that? It sounded like a rant. I didn't mean to rant, but please, please, please don't send me questions about marriage anymore. I'm not interested in marriage. I really am not. I'm interested in companionship and love and humanity, and people who are doing that together, having children together, who are doing their best to support one another. I think it's beautiful. If those people decide to get married, I think it's beautiful. If they decide they don't want to get married, and when I'm talking about marriage, it's just the formalization of papers, I think it's beautiful. Generally, I like for people to introduce one another to their families so you're not isolated. That's marriage. But anything else is personal. You should just do what works for you. However, don't become terrified by the ticking biological clock, and because of that, marry, unduly when you are not ready. That's my take on it. Thank you. I'll see you next week. Send me more questions. Ask for me. Bye.